in another Abstract Live program. This time we're going to do it in Spanish. So, o sea, in English, not Spanish. In English, not
It
Spanish.
scared me there.
And we have like the best for these retro weekends. We have the best guest we could ask for. So thank you, Felipe. He's also here. So we have two guests today. I'll start with Felipe. Felipe right now is a Chilean developer currently working in Ubisoft in Germany, and he's also a retro fan developer. And we have Rob Jeager, the creator of the original Montezuma's Revenge. So he is the original creator, and he agreed to come here and talk with us because he said that they say, and he also confirms that Chileans are one of the most like Montezuma's fan. And joining me as a co-interviewer is Franco Catrin. You all know him. He's like the Chilean guy who appeared in TV talking about computers in the like late 90s, beginning of the 2000s. So, how are you, Rob?
Oh, I'm great. Thanks for having me on. I was telling you before, I'm always very, very happy, very flattered, and I'm just always impressed by the number of fans that I have in Chile, or fans of Montezuma, the people who remember Montezuma in Chile. So I'm very happy to be here with you guys this morning.
How are you, Felipe?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So, Felipe, what time is it in Germany?
It's 2 p.m.
2 p.m. So we have Robert 8 a.m.
Yep.
So we're in 3 continents right now doing an interview. So let's start talking about Robert. Could you tell us how you met Felipe? Because he's the one that actually gave us your contact and everything. So could you tell us like your part of the story? How did you meet him?
Okay, Felipe contacted me. I believe it was through email. It was a while ago when I did, and he came to me basically proposing a Nintendo version of Montezuma, and I get a lot of requests like this, and my first instinct is to deny it and say no, I'm doing my own things here. I don't, thank you very much, I'm not interested. And the reason I do that is because much more often than not, the person contacting me is really not ready, not qualified to do the job, and they usually have more what we call moxie, more aggression than talent frequently. But I heard Felipe out, and I looked into him, and I see that he's a really terrific programmer, and a huge fan of the game. And I basically I asked him to come on and help me out a little bit. I needed a little bit of help in the coding of the cross-platform version that we were mentioned before, the version, the reboot of Montezuma. At the time, I was having some problems with the Android version, and Felipe came on for a good number of months and helped out on that while he was working on the Nintendo project. And finally, we're at the point where the game, the Nintendo version, is ready to go, and we're really happy about that.
So you said the Nintendo versions. How many versions are there of Montezuma right now?
Okay, I don't. Okay, I can't give you a quick answer to that, but let me think. It was originally written, of course, on the Atari computers, and there was versions for the Apple, for PC, Commodore 64, of course, the Atari disc. It was out for ColecoVision. It was re-released for the Sega Master System a few years later, and I think I covered. It was about 7 or 8 different. It was really, I would say, every popular console and game system of the time, with the exception of the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Intellivision. Those were the two systems that didn't have Montezuma. Pretty much every other popular system of the 80s and every popular computer had a version of Montezuma's Revenge.
I think that I saw a version for the CX Spectrum, but
yes,
with a different name.
That's correct. Yeah. I was not involved in that release, and in fact, I've never even I've never played it or even seen it. The Spectrum was never very popular in the United States, and that I believe was I believe that may have been released by Parker Brothers, capitalizing on the Panama Joe label, which they gave to the character. So I really wasn't involved in that particular version, but I gave approval to all of the original versions, and also there was a Game Boy version that came out in the late '90s too. But well, that's a different. That was with a different company. It was eventually released through GT Interactive's budget line. But I believe that covers all of the official releases, and of course now it's released for mobile phones, and it's available for Steam, PC, Macintosh, and mobile systems at the usual software stores.
Yeah. So, Felipe, this question is for you. What drove you to do a Nintendo version of this game? You're muted, Felipe.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, a dream that I had as a child to make my own game when I first got my NES, and people or kids, they just like to play, but I was more into, I like to make games. I would love to do this. So I dreamed about that all the time. And finally, when I am a programmer, and I'm a programmer just because I want to make games. So I entered to the industry, but the idea of making an NES game was there. And well, a couple of years ago, I found that the homebrew games, the normal people making games for the NES is quite big, and the community is really nice. So there are a lot of information on how to make those games. So I thought, well, why not? So I started to thinking, okay, then maybe this is the time, and I will do this. So I wanted to make a game, and my first thoughts was, well, I would like to do a port of my loved child game that is Montezuma's Revenge, and that's why I contact Robert.
Awesome.
And also, Felipe, in today's standards, most people use an engine like Unreal or Unity to develop their games, but in the NES, probably you have to develop new skills for that. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, and in fact, there is an engine for the NES called NESmaker, and it without any programming knowledge, you can make a game and actually dump the game into an actual cartridge.
Awesome.
And they are selling this, and it's a product, you have to pay for it, but it's really nice. It's really awesome. But and you can. I want the full experience, quotes, because back in the day, the hardware, the limitations, or the software were more limited than I have an emulator. I have like other tools to create a game, but I really wanted from scratch, like I'm an empty page and writing assembly code, and from the ground up to build an entire game. That's my I am really a tech guy. I don't like really much to use engines like Unity or Unreal. I like to make them, not use them.
I just must say I am also like a tech guy, but I'm the opposite side of Felipe. I like to use tools, and I do like to make tools, but high level tools. And and it's really fun to work with people like Felipe and to be able to interview you Rob. It's really fun because I wasn't even born. I do look old, but I'm actually the younger here by far. I'm like 35, so I actually wasn't born when Montezuma was launched. So the thing is that for me, making those games with those technologies is like witchery. You see the things you had to make this game, and you see what people. I actually am a professor in a university, and I teach game development, and I do work on computer graphics. I do work on physics and everything. And even though we work on like low level, is nothing in comparison with what you had to work on. So my question is, could you describe the tools you had and how you had to test test your game and everything, and how long did it take to build? Did it build? What language did you use?
I mean, Robert or me?
Robert.
I'm sorry. I thought that was for
No, it's for you, Robert.
For Felipe. Well, I mean, of course, the original Montezuma, of course, was written in 6502 assembly language, and like what Felipe was saying, real low level coding like this is really of course, it's the most difficult type of computer programming, but it's really exciting because software people frequently figure out can do things that the hardware people don't even envision. Yeah. And when you talk about witchery, when you talk about witchcraft in programming, I do think about machine language, assembly language programming, and specifically when you get into the highest level, I think of assembly language programming is adjusted code, where the code itself adjusts the code to make it run faster. And some of the later games on the Atari 800 were able to move a tremendous amount of data on the screen, and it really did seem like witchcraft to us. But that was self-adjusted code, and that's really like a black art it's a black art within a black art, I guess, of assembly language. But Sven, I'm like you in the sense that I have moved on to these these game platforms. Unity is, and the Unreal Engine. These are fantastic code bases for games, and they allow for individuals to create incredible demos, incredible games, and to prove to people like me, like, oh yes, you can do the work. You can do it on your own. You didn't, you're not just showing me a college degree. You're showing me that you can take the tools and do things. And the amount of time that's saved with these tools it's unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, it's truly incredible. So I'm a fan of both. I'm a fan of high level and low level coding. Although the coding that I do now is almost exclusively C++.
Oh, awesome!
The version, the Montezuma, I still code the cross-platform version of Montezuma. So that's mainly my code at this point in there, and it's C++, and I do use a cross-platform game engine. I'm using Cocos 2DX, which is open source.
Yeah.
On that.
Right. Also, today the developers of the old machines know a lot better the hardware, so they can do a lot of tricks. But when you started in the early 80s, just after the Atari 800 was launched, you made a great work exploiting the hardware. You did a lot of stuff that I don't think that was common in those days. In those days, most games were just arcade boards. And Montezuma brought another. It was a game changer, a game that was a game changer. You did some hardware tricks. I can tell the people watching the transmission. The Atari has some specific hardware features like the players that are like sprites, but you are limited to only 4 players, so you can do a few things. But you made a character and also the enemies with player missiles, and it's the game looks like there was more than 4. So you made some quality tricks there.
Yeah. I wrote well, on the Atari we call them player missile graphics. The rest of the world knows them as sprite graphics. So the character Pedro himself is 2 of them, because you need to combine 2 to create the 3-color, 4-color Pedro. So that's correct. There were 4 sprites, and there were actually 5, because you're able to combine the missiles into a single sprite also. So there were 5, but 2 of them were used on Pedro. And to be able to get the spiders and the skulls and the other moving graphics, I divided the screen into segments, and I was able to reuse the sprites as those raster drew the actual image. So back then that was really kind of like what you were saying, like that was kind of witchcraft for the Atari. But a lot of games were doing that after Montezuma. But where Montezuma really, to me, the breakthrough in Montezuma, and I don't consider Montezuma to be all that original in the sense that I was inspired, and I borrowed from Donkey Kong, and I also mention as far as like there were games out for even the 2600, like Atari Adventure and Superman, that were non-linear and the actual gameplay was many screens. So Montezuma was kind of like a merging of these 2 ideas of taking a non-linear, very large scale game map, but also include the jumping and arcade features of a Donkey Kong type game. What was I leading to? So as far as originality with Montezuma, I forgot what the question was that I was leading to while I was talking about this.
Just don't worry. We wanted to ask you that part as well, because the game, it looks very original. Well, you said that the adventure game on the 2600 and Donkey Kong inspired you, but you take it to another level because, for example, in Donkey Kong, there's only 3 or 4 screens. Montezuma is an entire world to explore.
Okay. Yeah, you were asking me, specifically about the technical features, and we were talking about sprites and the multiplexing of sprites. But what I was bringing up was the fact that the nonlinear aspect of Montezuma, I consider to be really probably the most. I say I don't want to use groundbreaking, but the reason I'm bringing it up is because over the last 5 years, and I don't know if you've been following this, but Montezuma was used by artificial intelligence researchers as the benchmark. So when Google and Uber and Facebook, they were using Montezuma as their challenge, like could we write software to beat Montezuma? And eventually they were able to do that, and that marked a major turning point in AI. And Montezuma got a tremendous amount of press because of all the AI researchers that were looking at this game as a turning point in video game history in essence. I don't consider it to be that that important and that great, but it's very flattering, of course, to see the researchers again and again and again talk about the game and show videos of the game and explain what's going on in the software that's training to show the game.
Yes. Also, I want to tell something about the technology for the young people that maybe watching us now. In today computers and consoles have a different type of screen rendering. they have a back buffer or pixel buffer where every dot is drawn. But in the old days, we had the screen being drawn line by line, and you have the opportunity to interrupt the display so you can change things in the screen. Most basic games just put everything at once in the screen. But games like Montezuma use a trick that you can interrupt the line when you can be notified when the television was running a line, so you can update some things. That's one of the tricks that use Montezuma very early, because I think that the games in that period were not that sophisticated in the Atari 800, because in the Atari 2600 was a different thing. Maybe Felipe, in the case of the NES, do you have to apply some tricks like that, or it was easier to make it?
I am muted. I know. Yeah. The NES, the original NES, is so bare bone, is so basic. It was meant to just run Donkey Kong. That's the whole idea. And the games that came later, like Super Mario Bros. 3 or Mega Man, or I don't know, any other modern game, they use tricks and they use extra hardware in the cartridge. So they use like in the NES era, they use coprocessors to run faster calculations. But in the NES, they use chips, additional chips called mappers, to give additional extra capabilities to the original hardware, extra channels to the audio, extra, or for example, the ability to get interrupts when a line is drawn. For the original NES, and we are making Montezuma's Revenge for the original NES, like Super Mario Bros. 1, Donkey Kong, that kind of game. So only 40K of space to make the game. It didn't have anything. There is no way to count the vertical lines. So yeah, the tricks that I had to. That's the thing. The Atari has more capabilities, and it's not surprising that the Atari is way more capable of doing hardware stuff to the games. It also comes with to get random numbers from hardware. So in the NES, you have to calculate this in software. It takes time. So it's. I am surprised that Atari is so more capable to do things than the NES that came way later. But maybe the Nintendo were reducing costs. I don't know. So the thing is, I had to do some tricks to accommodate the original game to a lower hardware capabilities. Like I couldn't draw multiple updates for the background, so I had to make tricks so to do it in multiple frames. Yeah, that kind of things are. The game looks nice, but it's way more impressive to look at what you can do in Atari. But I did some tricks to accommodate the whole game and make it looks nicer, and like rendering everything in multiple frames. So if you slow down the game like really low, you will see that everything is being updated in multiple passes, like updating, for example, the fire and the change and all other animated tiles. They are updating first in one frame, this area, then this area, then this area. But when you see at 60 frames per second, everything seems seamless. So it's that kind of tricks I did.
Illusions.
Illusions, yes. and for Rob, the 6502 didn't have instructions for multiplication or division, only adds and subtractions. And one of the things that was very impressive with Montezuma was the jump. When you jump, you see you see Pedro falling down. You see, you feel some weight. Can you tell us about that?
It's interesting you bring that up, because yeah, I was actually very proud of the of the Pedro jump when it came out, because you might remember, there was a game out called the Miner 2049er by Big Five Software. Outstanding game. I loved this game, and I would include it as a Montezuma influence. But that character moved like a triangle. Like when he jumped, he went up and he went down like that. And I'm like, that's not natural. That's not a natural jump. So it's funny because we're working on the code, on the original code, and there's so many things that I didn't remember how I did it when I was 15 years old when I wrote the original Montezuma. We're talking about 40 years ago. So there were things I didn't remember. But as far as the jump, I do remember. What I did is I used a delta on the Y position, and I moved the delta and I adjusted the delta on each cycle to give that nice smooth jump. One thing we were mentioning before about the what we called the display list interrupt, the ability for the Atari hardware, the Atari graphics hardware had the ability to interrupt the CPU when the display list, which was a list of code that described the resolution. You were able to, on the Atari, you're able to mix resolutions. You're able to have bands of high resolution, bands of characters, bands of low resolution as the raster is drawing its thing. And the way the display list interrupt worked is, as the raster is going back and forth, you would say, okay, when it gets here, execute this code. So so it would know to do that, and I would be repositioning sprites, doing things as the code went down. But the key thing about a good game, especially back in those days, was making sure that you kept true to that 60 frames a second. But also, in addition to the display list interrupt, we had the vertical blank interrupt. Now, the vertical blank interrupt, that was hit every time the raster was not drawing the screen. So we knew when it was safe to update the graphics, because we knew it wasn't being drawn. You always want to avoid the flicker and the shearing that you get when you're putting graphics on a display at the wrong time. So with games like Montezuma, and really every good Atari game, almost all the work was done in the vertical blank interrupt. That's where the code was. So the code was basically an interrupt. That the entire game was an interrupt, and you had to keep that, make sure that cycle that was less than far less than a 60th of a second, because a 60th of a second includes the drawing of the screen. So you have to really, you got to keep your cycle tight. And a big part of the reason why these games were so much fun, and more fun than current games, is the fact that the hardware was designed for this purpose, and there was nothing interfering with it. Where, I mean, in the sense, you have PC games, and it's like you don't have that perfect interaction that you have with a game console when you have other software running in the background, and operating system concerns and things, even Wi-Fi and the internet being operated off of the same CPU. These machines were designed for graphics and game effects, and the Atari was truly magnificent for its time. It was amazing. And like what Felipe was saying, like I remember when the Nintendo first came out, we were like, people like me, you have to understand, at that time, Nintendo was not a household name in the United States. We knew Donkey Kong, but that's all we knew about Nintendo. I mean, it was in Japan, of course, they were always huge. But in the United States, very few people cared about Nintendo. Sega was a much more household name company at that point. And at the time where the Nintendo Entertainment System came out, the Sega Master System came out, and the Sega Master System, that was a beautiful piece of hardware that had excellent sprites, and it was much more powerful and capable than the Nintendo. But Nintendo had the marketing dollars. It came in at a lower price point, and it took off and just became the game system of the 90s. So at the time, there was a Sega version of Montezuma, and because there was a Sega version, it's part of the reason why there was no Nintendo version.
And maybe I think that sometimes the people know only the ones that today exist. For example, Nintendo, Apple, but they forgot the other systems that maybe were more popular that time. For example, Atari or Commodore or Sinclair. That's the case, I think, sometimes of Nintendo, because Nintendo was very popular, but the Sega hardware was insanely great. The latest consoles that they released were very advanced for the time. The same with the Commodore Amiga, was a machine very advanced. The Commodore Amiga was launched in 1985, and just 2 years before the NES, and it was
the Commodore Amiga was probably the most powerful, the greatest advancement in computer graphics for home computers that we've ever had. It's so we don't give the Amiga the credit that it deserves. It never became a household machine the way it should have. But it was magnificent, and I wrote. I never had anything. Actually, I never took anything to market, but I started and didn't finish a few Amiga projects. Amiga had a graphics mode. You may remember the hold and modify graphics mode, where they were able to put 32,000 colors on the screen in a high resolution mode. And they had that beautiful monkey, that mandrill ape. If you might remember this graphic, the colorful monkey. And it was photorealistic. It was the first time that we really saw photorealism on home computers. It was stunning. But this graphics mode just wasn't good for games, because it was a brilliant scheme for producing photographs in beautiful high resolution, but for games it was kind of useless, because each pixel was based on the pixel to the left. And so if you're doing a photograph, you're dealing with gradients, and you're dealing with that. So if you're just changing, you're limited to the amount of elements of color that you're able to. So you're shifting. So each pixel is based on the data to the pixel to the left. And when you're doing a photograph, it comes out beautifully this way. It's stunning how effective it was for still images and for backgrounds, but you couldn't move those graphics.
Yes. And we also have to mention that the Commodore Amiga, they used the brand Amiga, but the Commodore Amiga was really an evolution of the Atari 800 hardware. So it has, yes.
You're right. It really is. That should have been the Atari. The next generation Atari computer. But at that point, I think the Atari name was already starting to get tossed around. Atari. It's sad to see what happened to Atari in the sense that when I was growing up, all I wanted, the goal of every game person was to work for Atari. That's what you wanted to do. You wanted to work for Atari. And Atari, there was one year, probably 1970, between 1979 and 1981, Atari put out a game probably almost every month or every few months in the arcades that was a totally new genre and incredible. That was a real magical time for the arcades, and Atari was on top of the world. And with the 2600 and with the tremendous success of the 2600, everyone wanted to work for Atari. But over the years, so many different owners have come out with various Atari products. Apparently, this new product, people are saying the hardware is very nice. The controls are very nice. I haven't seen it.
The Atari VCS.
Yeah, the latest Atari VCS. I haven't seen it. It does seem like this particular generation of Atari is paying more respect to the name than previous owners have.
The brand.
But it's sad to see such an incredible brand, more or less deteriorate.
Yeah, I wanted to about like modern game development. Someone actually told us that the Atari VCS, because they were looking to do like a low spec home console that could run the old games, but also could like distribute like new games. Very strange. And they were actually like working with new developers, but actually I do think that they have more respect for the brand, but they still, I think it's very hard. They don't actually like, they couldn't like go into the market like very effectively. I think it's a problem that comes from consoles like the Ouya. Like Ouya did more harm than good after all, because it was like a very high profile, like low spec console for the home, and it was like a disaster. And right now, like I think the big three companies like PlayStation, Nintendo, and Microsoft are just like grabbing the market, and there's I don't see space for something else right now. I think there is space, but I think, and Atari I think has a really good brand to do something, but with the years, because did they launch this console, the VCS? I think they haven't launched it yet. Let me check.
VCS is
It is in the market.
it is in the market. Yes,
When did it? 2020. It didn't. Yeah.
probably after March 2020, yesterday.
No, it came. Let me check.
It's been
Yes.
one of the questions that we had, and that the Atari brand remind me about that question. We know today that there was a big game crash in the early 80s.
Mhm.
For us in Chile, the
Yeah.
crash didn't exist.
Yeah.
We didn't know about it. We had the Atari brand here in Chile, I think in 1985, and the crash was 2 or 3 years earlier. And most of us young people know about the crash because we have read about it. But you, Rob, was there in in the first seat.
Yeah, I was there for the crash. The crash was terrible. It was I've never experienced anything like the first generation home game crash, home game console crash. I could tell you what I remember. Back in the 80s in New York City, there was an agent, a software agent who used to throw parties at his office every week. And it was a lot of software industry guys were there, a lot of programmers. I remember meeting some Activision guys at his parties. And I used to go to these parties, and the guys from Electronic Games Magazine, Arnie Katz and Bill Kunkel, used to always be there at the parties. And it was a good time. We used to go and hang out and eat and drink. And I mean, I was 16 years old, but it was just, it was the game industry people. And I just went to, it was like, I didn't show up at the party for several weeks, what it might have been a month or two. And then I showed up at the party and I see Arnie Katz and I say, Arnie, how are you? And he's, terrible, because we shut our doors. Electronic Games Magazine is finished. And he was, he used to joke around, I'm like, and he's like, oh yeah. And then he starts listing all these major companies that shut their doors that week. And I'm like, are you like, you're kidding around? And he was with Joyce and the other people from Electronic Games, and they're like, yeah, well, you don't realize what's going on in our business. It's like, we don't know what to do at this point. We got to find jobs someplace else. And I like, it hit me like, what? They were right. It is a fad. It was a fad. Like the older people were saying, "Oh, video games, yes. Like that. Don't waste your time with this. It's it's like the pet rock or things like that. These faddish things." so I'm like, oh my God, they were right. This is terrible. And so we're sitting there, we were just drinking and just saying, what are we going to do with our lives now? The video game business is done. But it really did. It hurt me. I mean, it hurt everybody. But it was such a different world. It was like 1 year. Parker Brothers was the publisher for Montezuma, and they used to call a limousine to pick me, a stretched limousine, like I was a rock star. Yeah, to bring me to the office, and they would like roll out the red carpet. When I would arrive at the office, they would treat me like I was like a rock star. And then the next year, it was like, here's the phone number of the cab company. We're not even going to pay for a taxi for you. That's how much things changed in a year. And Parker Brothers, they were certainly in the top 10 publisher. They couldn't figure out how to make money. I mean, everyone. It was like games went from millions of dollars of profits with big contracts and superstar developers to all of these companies just couldn't figure out how to even turn a profit with any game. So it was a terrible time. The first crash, people that remember it, that lived through it, everyone has a story to tell like this. It was bad. I mean, it was so bad that it spooked me from games. I took a job doing financial technology for a number of years. So I've always been a software person, but the game crash was devastating. It was really, really bad.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that you had a game or a project in that time. When the crash happened?
Yeah, well, the game that I wrote during the crash, the specific story that I mentioned about the taxi, that was Crossfire Canyon. Crossfire Canyon was a game that was originally written on the VIC-20 by my neighbor, a friend of mine named Dave Sullivan. And he did a beautiful job, assembly language. He saw what I was doing, and he was, and he's like, I'm gonna do games too. And I was really impressed how good he was at doing low level coding. And at the time, now the Commodore 64, that was another phenomenal machine for its time. The sprites were magnificent. Having 8 full color sprites was like, wow, that was absolutely amazing to be able to do that, to have that amount of power. So I took Dave's game, Crossfire Canyon, for the VIC-20, and I ported it over to the Commodore 64. I wanted to learn the Commodore 64 hardware, and I thought this game was a lot of fun. But Crossfire Canyon was a retro game in 1986 and 1987. I mean, it was a basic fun game. See, to me, I thought part of the reason the games crashed is that games just started getting too complex and too the people were forgetting about the fun element of interaction and 60 frames a second. I was seeing that starting already. So I just took a step back with Crossfire Canyon and created a retro game in the 80s. And I don't even remember doing a deal for it, but I guess I did. I mean, based on video evidence on YouTube. But this is going back, back to the 80s. A small publisher did publish this game eventually, but I couldn't get Parker Brothers to publish that game. But they weren't doing any games at that time. The last time I saw Parker, they were always very, very nice to me, but they were very clear that they were very uncertain about the game industry and whether or not they were going to continue. And a few weeks later, they made the decision to shut down their video game division altogether. And lots of companies did that. There were when games were hot in the first generation, almost every toy company, took a stab at video games, and some of them had success.
at the time, there was the Consumer Electronic Show, the CES. I think that it was twice a year, and most computer companies presented their new computers in that show. I think that you were in that show. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, you probably heard the story. The Consumer Electronics Show, the CES, predates E3 as the industry trade show.
Yeah.
So of course, consumer electronics shows covered all of consumer electronics. So the game business, wasn't big enough to deserve its own show. But even back then, in the early '80s, the game area was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was clear that the games were the main attraction of the Consumer Electronics Show. However, I should take a step back. There were two main attractions of the Consumer Electronics Show: the games and the adult video section. Okay. Those were the two areas of the show that everyone went to. Okay, so everyone who went to the Consumer Electronics Show, they went through the game area, wanted to see what all the majors were doing, and they, even now, of course, but even back then, the major companies, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on their exhibit. So they would construct multi-level structures within the exhibit hall. And it was just, it was a spectacle. It was a magnificent show. But of course, my little company was my father and myself. And my father was able to get us a share. He found someone who was renting half of their booth. Like, we just wanted to get to the Consumer Electronics. We just wanted to get on the floor. We didn't care. I'm like, is it near the game section? Well, they didn't think it was, whatever. Okay, so it's not near the game section. So we get there, and the booth that I was sharing with was a blank video cassette company, VHS video cassettes. So half of the booth was just stacks of blank video cassettes, and the other half was me showing off my demos of Montezuma. The Montezuma demo was pretty much done at that point. I was showing the Montezuma demo, and I was showing Pinhead, which was a clone of Kick. It was very derivative of Kick, the arcade game Kickman. And as soon as we are unpacking, we realize, oh my God, we're in the video section. We are right at the entrance of the adult video section. So we had a magnificent spot. I mean, everyone saw Montezuma, but they didn't see it in the game section. They saw it in the adult section. But at the time, you have to remember how popular VHS video was at that time, and how popular the adult film stars, because they were celebrities at that time. It was similar in a way. It was similar to professional wrestling. They were characters. They were larger than life characters, and they were all there. They were all there. So I wish I had a photograph of this, but both John Holmes and Ron Jeremy together were standing there watching Montezuma's Revenge. And, I was so in awe. I couldn't believe it. But yeah, I did get a chance. I actually got a chance to meet them both and talk to both.
And you were underage.
Oh yes, I was 16, but I was very aware of who they were. But they were big. They were really big stars. They were very famous at the time. So that's how. Now that was an interesting show, but that's how I met Parker Brothers too. We were at the booth.
Yes.
And we would notice that people with Parker Brothers name tags were coming by. They were coming, and looking at my father, there's another one. There's another Parker Brothers person. Parker Brothers people that coming by. So we were getting we knew something good was happening there. But also, on the other hand, I was showing my Pinhead game, which was a clone of Kickman. The Bally Midway people had interest in that. They were coming by. They were looking at that. They were saying, well, they were looking at both. They were like, look at that. Oh, that's interesting. We don't like that. So anyway, the guys from Parker Brothers pulled me aside and said, "Listen, we see what you're doing here. You don't self-publish this. This is a special game, and we want to talk to you. We can do this right for you. We can get your worldwide distribution, and we will port the game to other system. We'll do everything for you." So of course, I was thrilled to have a major company like a Parker Brothers interested in my title, and Parker they were very, very selective about the games that they produced. If you remember, I don't think there was any other original. I think Montezuma's Revenge was the only original game title that Parker Brothers ever produced. And I say original, I'm talking about every other title they produced was either an arcade port or based on a very popular movie or a brand. In other words, it had something that more or less guaranteed its success at that point in time. Montezuma was their biggest risk that Parker ever took for a game, and we got lucky. I mean, we got, if it was 6-7 months later, the crash and everything changed, and Montezuma got in just really before the first video game crash.
Yeah, this makes me remember, like, have you ever heard about the indie apocalypse?
The what apocalypse?
The indie apocalypse is something that happened because there's the press is somewhat like divided on this, but there was a time when doing an indie game in the modern times, I'm talking about 2010 to 2015, was really viable, like to self-publish, to launch your game on Wii, on Xbox, on PlayStation. And then it came the indie apocalypse. It's a time around 2015 when like everyone started like opening their stores, and the flood of games made it like very difficult for everyone to sell games.
Okay, I never heard the expression before, but I get you.
Yeah.
However, I think that there are opportunities for independent developers, even solo developers these days. And I believe it's in the virtual reality, and what's going on right now with the Oculus Quest 2. Some real groundbreaking stuff going on in that area, and there are individuals that are actually doing groundbreaking things in that area. But yeah, it's difficult. I mean, it's difficult for indie developers, even with a title like Montezuma, which people remember, people love. The last couple of years where I've dedicated my time full time to Montezuma and my business. I earn a fraction of the income that I've earned as a developer working for a large company. It's basically, hopefully 2022 with the Nintendo release. And I'm also finally releasing ad-supported free versions of the mobile version of Montezuma. So hopefully 2022 will be a profitable year. But the game business is tough. The indie games, it's not. I don't know anyone who's in it for the money. It's just real simple.
Well, some employees are in for the money, but creators, But so let me just do a small recap for the people that has joined us during this time. We are talking with Rob Jeager and Felipe right now. Rob Jeager is the original creator of Montezuma's Revenge many years ago. Decades ago, and Felipe right now is a Chilean developer that currently works in Germany, and he actually made the NES port like this year, around this time of the last few years. He did the NES port of Montezuma. We are joined also with by Franco Catrin, our resident expert in old technology, and we are talking about this now. there's something I always do during these visits, and it's talk about who Abstract Digital is and why we do these small interviews and these small segments to teach people about game development. We are actually an indie game development company. We are one of the two companies that made Tormented Souls, this horror, this retro, not as retro as our guest, but this retro horror themed game called Tormented Souls, inspired by Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and oh, I forgot the Alone in the Dark. And we are game developers as a company. We are specialized mainly in software development, and we also have like a small game that is about Chile. You actually play as a little girl and her grandfather as she travels from the mountains to the sea after her mother passes away. This game is still in early access, so it will be really great if you support us in bringing the final game to the Nintendo Switch and of course Steam. And that's who we are. And right now we're talking with Montezuma's creator. And just to let you know, Montezuma is currently available in too many too many places. No, not too many. It's a game that it's still going strong decades after its launch. So we invite you all to buy it on Steam or on your mobiles, wherever you can. Just give it a go. This is a classic, and it actually is considered one of the first games to be around this genre called Metroidvania. Have you heard that comparison, Rob?
Yeah. Actually, Felipe was the first person to tell me, to explain it to me. Yeah, it does seem like the Metroidvania series was somewhat inspired by Montezuma. I understand there's some pretty excellent games. I haven't played them, but from what I understand, that series of games kind of carried the torch of the Montezuma type platformer, into the next decades. I feel, I mean, I absolutely neglected the brand for probably almost a decade and a half, maybe even a little longer than that. My career, as I mentioned before, it was split between game development and financial technology. So for years, I worked in New York and in Paris on hedge fund software and software that stock market people use. But now I'm back into games 100% full time.
So did you work on financial software for the thrill or for the money? No, I remember like you said, like no one is in game development for the money, and I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. I tell kids this all the time, because I look at game, like people want to become game developers now. Like now, it's so difficult. It's very, very difficult to break into game development, really, in any aspect of it. It's very competitive. Everyone wants to be a game developer. Every artist wants to work on games, and to me, I say it's a phenomenal way for young people to learn coding, to learn how to program, to learn how to be a computer programmer. And if you want a career, I would say stay away from games. It's very, very difficult. It's a hit or miss business. And the amount of work, if you're in almost any other industry, you'll as a good software developer, you'll get paid handsomely for this work. If you're in banking or in finance or in general computer services, the work is much easier than game development and pays a lot more. So the way I look at it is like, I encourage all young people to learn coding, and games are fun. So it's a phenomenal way to learn how to code. And if you're good at it, do it as a hobby, and do it. If you're exceptional at it, you can make a career possibly. but you always have that you have that backup. You always can find, if you're a good coder, you'll be able to find a job.
That's a very good recommendation. And I want to ask Felipe, because he worked in the big companies as game developer. He actually make the we can like infer that there's some bad experiences working on game development. And now you are working on the game industry, Felipe, but you're working like in a software job, more like traditional software. So could you tell us a little bit about your experiences and your recommendations for young people that want to make games?
Sure. Well, like Robert says, making game is for everybody who wants to learn about coding. Coding is super fun. It's a creative work. You can draw really nice, or you can code a really fun game, and also maybe game design is also part of that. You can combine all of that, or maybe have just one part of that. And but any creative area, it's good to have. Yeah, they don't pair well, but I am working now at Ubisoft as a software developer. I'm not making games because I wanted to step out a bit, because when you work with mobile companies for making games, it's super rough. The market is so stressful, competitive, that you have to like Robert says, it's a hit or miss, or you're making money or you're just losing money, and then you're bankrupt really fast. So it's stressful a bit. At Ubisoft, I am fine. I'm not making games because it's more relaxed not making games. You are not stressful for times. You have to deliver that date, or the press is on waiting for something. So my advice for young viewers is, or who wants to get into this, it's do it. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy the environment. Working in a video game company, it's really fun compared to maybe a bank or any other normal company. I don't want to switch to that. I know maybe I could earn more money, but I don't really care, because I'm having fun. That's what I all care.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell that just this is like my advice. I have been working in the game industry for about 10 years. I'm really young compared to everyone here, but still I'm quite older than some obviously some people. And usually it takes a lot of years to just break it, like just to make, because I agree with you, Rob, that the skills needed to do like games are really high. Even today with these engines and everything, like doing good games, because making a game, everyone can make a game. Like a bad game can be done by everyone, but a game that's good and that could actually have like the potential to sell right now, you need to make a really good game, and you need to actually be able to find or do like really good marketing. Like if you have a partner that does the marketing for you, or you are able to get a publisher and get the money to make the game, and if it flops, you like go away like without a bankrupt. It's great, but you need to to be able to think about business, creative, quality, and it's a lot of work, because as Rob said, right now when Rob did games, I think one of the things was that you had to have the technology and the knowledge. Right now, you have to have the technology that is cheaper, much cheaper. You have to have the knowledge that it's wider, like everyone, there's more knowledge everywhere, and also you have to be able to make yourself discoverable. So it's very hard to make games right now. But I agree with Felipe. It's really fun. It's a really nice industry to be in, and hopefully with we make I'm doing everything I can so that in Chile is more viable. But usually we have to do it like with some government funds, with some publisher, like everything you say about the Parker brothers. It's like the same thing today. Like usually we cannot, you can self-publish, but nowadays after the in the apocalypse, it has become like launching, throwing a game to the sea. Like no one will see it. Like it's like it would just sink. So it's really really hard. You need like this publisher to actually show the game to someone. And usually, even with a publisher, your game can be like go to obscurity really fast. So it's a really 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 interesting industry, but it's fun. For me at least it's still fun. In the future maybe I will also like do something else, but I have to say that I'm very comfortable because I'm a professor at a university, so I have an income, like a steady income, and I have my company in the side. But the guys that work in the company right now are very happy, and there is starting to be an industry where you can go and work. But yeah, I agree, like the salaries are like for the skills you have like as a programmer, the amount of work you have to do and the amount of stress you have to take, I think the salaries are not are not quite there, like it's like that. So Rob, just to go back to the Montezuma and everything, what made you come back to Montezuma and come back to the gaming industry? Because you, as you said, you neglected it like for 15 years. What made you come back?
Well, it was always in the back of my mind to get back into games and to do something with Montezuma again. I was working full time for many years as an independent software contractor. So even though I was working full time, I would go from job to job, and I made a decision that when my current contract was over, I was going to go back into Montezuma full time. But it also had to do with the fact that this is already going back, over 10 years ago. And I'm saying 10, but it was 10 years ago when I released the iOS version of Montezuma. I was still working full time back then, but I was looking at the mobile games as a really good platform for Montezuma. So I wanted to exploit that. And of course, Steam, and hopefully in the next year, I'll be able to secure some deals for the real game consoles, your Xbox, your PlayStation. So basically, I always got fan mail from Montezuma. People always, even though I've done a lot of things in my career, things I consider to be a lot more important than Montezuma. Montezuma is the thing people remember me for. I mean, it's the Montezuma is I guess my little chapter and my little paragraph in the book of video game history. So I wanted to exploit the product again. But I really did think it would take less time to become profitable with it. I mean, I'm still not profitable. I mean, we're like I said, 2022 should be a good year for Montezuma. It's difficult. The game business is difficult, and I knew that going in. And one thing I want to mention. I encourage young people to create games, and part of that is there's something very unusual about programmers, good coders in general. And I always felt that writing computer code is more of an art than a science. And it's both.
Yeah.
But the art part is more important than the science part. And I say the art part, I say the part that really can't be taught.
Yeah.
And there are people that are far more intelligent than me that are just not good at writing code. And this is just, it's a phenomenon that we have going on here. There are people people like myself who have hardly any formal education, who are natural coders. I just took to it. There was no doubt in my mind that this is what I do. And it was incredibly easy for me, where I've seen people that are far more educated than me and understand math at levels I can't even begin to comprehend, that cannot write computer code. because it's whatever, it's a separate part of the brain. I don't know what it is, but you do need to know. You need to admit or realize, and people can realize this at an early age if they have what it takes to become a good coder.
Yeah.
Usually people that are good at writing computer code are good at geometry. It's more or less the same part of the brain that figures out proofs and in geometry, puzzle solving part of the brain, I guess you could say. So it's just important to understand that it's not an insult. If you happen not to be good at this, it's kind of like not being good at a sport or something. It's just some people are born having this aptitude, and it's very hard to explain because it's not exactly intelligence.
No,
it's something else, and it does. But in games, one thing that's absolutely required is this tenacity. You can't give up. You're going to have problems. You're going to have bugs. It's going to have endless frustration. But you have to just keep on going. I mean, when Felipe first came to me, I was struggling with an Android bug for months. I had a bug in the code that I couldn't figure out what the heck was causing it, and eventually I figured it out. But just having someone like Felipe who I can talk to, explain. Here's the problem. What do you think it might be? Just having other great coders to around really helps. This process where you could have one bug that could hold you up for months, like that.
Yeah, actually, as a professor, usually I have it's very hard because when I have to teach people that doesn't know how to program for me it's like very hard because you have to tell them and you have to trust in them that they have to learn it. Like there's a part of programming that you can teach. And there's a part of programming that is just your brain going like, it has to click.
It has to click.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that part, you cannot teach it. Like you cannot teach it. Like he has to find it, and everyone has their own voice when they program. There's something that's very interesting that programming starts like with something that you find somewhere, because I agree that it's not something that you can teach with science. It's like you can teach some algorithm and stuff, but the way you approach problems and the way you design programs is something that has to be born from your head somewhere. And usually it's much easier for me to help people grow in programming than to teach people to program from zero. So
yeah, and I look at what I mentioned before, this tenacity, this great desire to want to be a game designer, game programmer, and just to follow through with it. Back in the old days, it was quite a bit more difficult. I look at now, you can go onto YouTube and you can learn almost any subject. If you desire education, especially in computer science, you can find anything. You find anything and everything for free now on the internet. Back when I was learning 6502, we had the Intel manual, and we had there was one book on computer graphics, which is an absolute classic by Michael Abrash, but that was it.
Yes.
Okay. Because there was no Day-Ray Atari, there was no, all of these books came later. All of the really great books that explain how to program the games and things like this. Back in the early days, we had nothing, and even something a subject as complex as assembly language programming, there was no instructional manual for it. Okay, there was for the Z80 at the time, but not for the 6502. So I happened to learn Z80 before 6502. So that book, the Z80 book, helped me learn 6502 more than any 6502 book did, because back then there just weren't any books that other than the technical manuals. So you had to go through those technical manuals that are just horrible to read, but that's really all we had back then. And like I was saying, a subject as complex as assembly language programming they weren't teaching this in regular universities or schools at this point. You had to go to a place like MIT to learn these types of things. I wasn't, I didn't have the types of grades in school to get into a college like an MIT or anything like that.
Yeah.
You had to do your own research, and it was very time consuming because back then, you had to go to the library. You had to find a library that had good technical manuals. It was a job. We're now. I try to think about people that are now that have this drive, this motivation to do great things. They have the Unity engine. They have this internet that allows them to learn anything they want to learn if they have the desire to do so.
Yeah, actually, I love a joke that says that programming should be called Googling Stack Overflow.
but it's true. I mean, as a programmer, people don't realize this. We spend our time in manuals and in reference material. And even I consider I've got decades of experience in programming C++, but even for me at a job interview, when they hand you a piece of paper and say, write code on, I'm like, that's incredibly difficult to do because we're constantly looking at the reference manual. Like, you think I even common functions that I use every day, I rely upon the compiler to tell me the variable type that it should be there. We become incredibly reliant on reference material, and part of being a great programmer is how good you are at looking something up on Stack Overflow or Google. And how quickly you can get to the bottom of things is part of the skill, big part of the skill.
Yeah, actually, I always tell my students that what I have that they usually don't have is that I am able to differentiate good solutions with bad solutions. When I search for a solution, that usually you find you can solve it like this, and it's such a bad solution. And you scroll and wait to find a really good solution.
This is what drives me crazy about modern programming. You see, back in the old days, everyone's Atari 800 was the same. Basically you had more or less memory.
Yeah.
But it's going to run fine on that. Android coding for Android is just the opposite. You've got thousands of devices that it has to work on. So you have these it's like a moving target. And now, as programmers, we all know when we have a problem, we look it up. We go to sites like Stack Overflow, and we rely upon the community a lot. We rely upon the community. Oh, someone else had this problem last year. So when I have a problem, you go, you do your research, you see what other people did, and frequently you'll find 10 solutions to your problem. Oh, I did this, or this worked for me. This didn't work for me. I tried this solution. This worked. I'm like, what's going on here? It's like, how do you know your software is really going to work? You don't. You really don't. And you with modern development, there's so many variations of every single machine that we really. We've gotten to the point where the first release of any software is expected to have problems.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, actually, with Tormented Souls, we launched this year. It was our first commercial launch, and it was full of bugs. It is still full of bugs, but you have to I think one of the secrets to have a good launch is to actually be on top of every bug you find, to actually accompany any famous Twitch streamer playing your game and be able to help them if they have a soft lock. We had a problem where a very big streamer soft locked himself with a puzzle, and two of the developers were there telling them, okay, try this. Okay, you got out of the soft lock. But it's really fun. It's really fun that how it changed from not being able to be there with the first games, you had to launch them as they were, very good quality, because you couldn't patch them.
We didn't have a second chance.
Yes.
No updates.
Yeah, and then we had these.
But at that time, the phrase "it works on my machine" was true.
Yeah.
You know, even for the Nintendo, I mean, of course, this is a real. What you see here is running on an original Nintendo.
Maybe the only difference is that the old system were very tied to the television standards.
Yeah.
So
that
if
is
you
true.
were in a region with PAL system, maybe your game won't work on NTSC systems. Maybe that's the only thing.
That is something that with Montezuma, I mean, a lot of people, if I'm correct, the people who played on PAL systems were playing at a different speed than the NTSC system, because everything was timed to the vertical blank.
Yeah,
and even different colors. They have different colors, a bit of different colors.
I don't think I've ever actually seen the game on played on a PAL, or I could probably find it somewhere on YouTube. But
it may be easier to play.
Yeah. Well,
but what I was saying before, the Nintendo system here, you know, like it's wonderful to be able to write code where you know it's going to work on every system. But now with the Nintendo world, we have the emulator boxes, the Retron. There's a few of them out there that are popular. So, you know, people now, you know, the retro gamers, you can buy a Retron like this one that I have right here. It's $17 on eBay, and you can play a Nintendo game. So we have to, you know, make sure that that our product is working on these other systems too.
Yeah.
So, and talking about the old systems, today we think that games are targeted to consoles and computers, PC mostly, and mobile systems. But there are many people creating games for all systems today. Just in the case that Felipe brings us, there are a lot of people creating NES games. There are a lot of people creating Commodore 64 games, Commodore Amiga games, CX Spectrum Atari games. Some of them are releasing their games as physical versions or collection versions. I want to mix two themes here, because here in Chile, sadly, a lot of people knew the pirated version of Montezuma. We were not able to purchase it. But I think that if there is a physical version of the Atari version, many people will be interested in having that version. And I think that I saw you in VCF 2019. There was an interview where they asked you about a physical release of Montezuma. Can you tell us something about that?
Well, when you say the physical, really, I mean, what we're talking about with the Nintendo cartridge.
No, for the Atari.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yes. Okay. We are developing what I'm calling the director's cut. Now, if I could take a step back, as I explained before, Montezuma's Revenge was originally written on the Atari 800. I was planning on maximizing the potential of the hardware. And the game, I was planning on creating a game that was going to be released on disc, that was going to take up the full disc with data, and, you know, banking in memory for different for the boss. The original game had game design had a boss. The original demo that got leaked had the boss, which is unbeatable. And it had a few other features. And you see, I was never, Montezuma's Revenge was never completed from my vision. Now when I signed on with Parker Brothers, right after I signed up, they're like, they told me, you don't have to finish. Don't bother finishing this, because we have to reduce your code anyway. So, you know, what you have is fine. Don't worry about the game. So I didn't worry about it. They took my original code, they reduced it, they got it onto, they made it into a cartridge form. They wanted to market it as a cartridge for most systems. So they reduced it, took things out. They did a good job and managed to fit it into, I believe it worked on an 8 or a 16K RAM system at the time. so it was the most. So they were able to market it to the highest number of computers. But I always wanted to finish Montezuma in my vision, and I like when you play Montezuma. There's the upper part of the pyramid has more rooms with a lot of action than the lower part of the pyramid does. And I really, my original vision of the game never had like 2 hallway rooms in a row. It would, be like just more challenges, more difficulty, and you would have to explore a lot more of the pyramid to get to the boss. And then the boss is a challenge of its own, and each level, the boss would be different. It would have the boss would get better at each level, and that's the full vision of Montezuma for the Atari, and we are working on the bat. Yes, the bat. The bat is in the Nintendo version too, by the way.
Awesome.
So we brought the bat back for Nintendo. So the Atari version, hopefully, should most certainly be released next year. We're really, as a company, we're really focused on this Nintendo release right now. But the Atari version, after this, the Nintendo version is launched, I'm going to be going pretty strong into this, what we're calling the director's cut of the Atari version, and it will be it'll be an Atari cartridge. It will be in cartridge form because, of course, now cartridges, we can put whatever we want on the cartridge. So and cartridge is the way to go, and we're not sure exactly how it's going to be marketed. Whether we'll probably be doing some limited edition a tier of marketing. We're going to have a limited edition release of the Nintendo version too. So for the Nintendo version, we're going to have a Kickstarter campaign, and hopefully we'll be starting that within weeks now, where we're going to have different tier levels as usual for these types of things, where people can participate if they want to participate, and just be at a low tier where they can just download the ROM only. We will have that, and then we'll have a grand tier that will include everything, the entire package plus special packaging, and a certificate limited edition. I'll sign and number each one, and that'll be like the real collector's item, Nintendo Montezuma package. If I can just pitch real quickly, I do have I am keeping a list of interest. So if you're interested in the Nintendo version, please. Well, I guess you can go. The Facebook page is Montezuma's Revenge Game, or my site, my company website is normaldistribution.com.
That was
a terrible name for a game company, but it's just one long word, normaldistribution.com. The origin of the name of my company, when I first formed it, when I first formed it, I was really I was working on financial hedge fund software that was based on random number math. So I just saw that the statistics term was available. So I just grabbed it as my domain name and named a company around a term. But yeah, so the people who are interested could please get yourself on the Nintendo list, and you'll be the first to hear about the. So there's the site. If you can see the retro carts, see that if under.
And before the interview, you were talking about some exclusive features of the NES version.
Okay, we were talking just before about the director's cut, this grand vision of Montezuma. The Nintendo version is not that. This Nintendo version is as if Parker Brothers came out with a Nintendo version, this is what it would have been. This is very authentic. The only the bat is the one thing that has been carried over from the original demo. But as far as the gameplay and the majority of the rooms is very, very faithful to the major better releases of Montezuma. So it's a nostalgia piece, and it is Montezuma as it would have been for the Nintendo. Next year's release on the Atari is this is more of a personal thing, and it will contain the finally finish the Montezuma boss that people have been waiting 40 years to see, 45 years to see. So so that's the Nintendo product that we're about to release is very true. And as Felipe was saying, the hardware that we're using is the original Nintendo hardware. So we're not cheating here. So we're using the original the lowest level assembly, raw assembly language code based on an original Nintendo cartridge. And we'll be able to sell it at a reasonable price, and hopefully the fans will be happy with it.
Yeah. So
I would like to add. Sorry, Sven. That the actual feature that maybe the NES has is the music.
Yeah. Music. Good point. Yes.
Yes, because back in the NES games, the games were expected to have music, so that's what we decided to for the NES version, to have soundtracks, and I have 3 melodies, I believe, as part of are brand new for this game, and we were discussing if we have music or not, and as for sure it's expected, so people will say, yeah, that game is fun, but it doesn't have any music. It sounds empty. But back in the Atari era, it was kind of normal because of hardware limitations, but the NES is expected to have a music, so that's why we have this feature, and it's a really nice music composed by a friend of Robert, and yeah.
Awesome.
Also, before we jump to something else, I would like to shout out to Alejandro Covelli, Chilean YouTuber, and he is the quality assurance for the game.
Awesome.
Yeah, he is an expert of the game. He's really he's really impressive with the game. He can run through all the levels and keep going with the entire pyramid being pitch black. So he is he's really, he gave me a lot of good feedback because for me maybe and for Robert it's impossible to play the game sometimes because the game is hard, you know. So we need capable people to run through the pyramid and find stuff like really weird stuff. He found a lot of them. So nowadays the NES game I think is really polished because of him. So shout out to you. Thank you for your contribution.
Yeah, well, I'm really, really happy that Alejandro Belli has joined our little group. He's a legendary game player. He's phenomenal. I've never seen anyone play Montezuma the way he does. And he's done a tremendous amount of work in quality assurance, both for the Nintendo version and also the cross-platform version. And he's also contributing greatly to the product, to the Nintendo product. He's working on the manual and graphics for the for what we're going to be including in the actual physical product. So Alejandro's great. We're really happy to have him.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really fun to see when you really love a product, and you have people loving the product, making it shows. And it's really fun to just see you come together because there's something that's really fun because you love technology. And I think that's something that the gaming industry has, is that people that don't make that much money, because there's people making money like some CEOs that right now are amidst some lawsuits, but the people that actually make games usually don't make that much money. And it's because I always say this, that there's some value in making this that is more important than big amounts of money. And when I started in this industry, I was actually thinking about making a great game and becoming a millionaire. Right now, I'm thinking like, oh, it would be great to actually be able to get a living wage and make games. Like that idea is like a really good dream, you know?
Yeah, you and me both. Yeah, it's. I'm very lucky that that I was part of that era at that time when with the individuals, were making nice money as game developers and had that rock star thing going on. But yeah, now it's a different world, and especially in our little niche of retro games. If you're in this area, you better love what you do. You better love games and just love it and just love everything about this. Because no, there's not big money is not to be found in this particular area.
Yeah.
In your case, Rob, it was a very good decision to keep the IP for you.
Yeah.
I think that most developers don't do that.
Yeah, well, that was my father, and I had a very good lawyer at the time with Parker Brother. He was very insistent upon that, about keeping. He was like, "You're going to want this for your future, and you're going to want this. Like, don't." They wanted all rights, they wanted full rights, but I was very insistent upon keeping licensing the rights for a limited period. And I had some terrific legal advice at a young age. Really
actually, so that you were like 2 decades ahead of your time, of our time, because right now it is somewhat standard, to keep your IP. But this is a standard from around 2013, like with the Indie Apocalypse, when the platforms opened up and you didn't need like a distributor anymore. Like it was like, okay, I can go with you or I can go alone. So what are you offering me? So they had to do some concessions. They couldn't like be like these strong guys saying, "Oh, we want everything," or your game won't see the light. Because during the 90s and the first half of the 2000s, the only way you could get to a gaming console or PC was through a publisher. Physical distribution was really like prohibitive. The cost was prohibitive because you had to do like this licensing with Nintendo, and you had to. They actually, some companies, and I'm not going to say which one, way like around 2013, the first half of the 2010s, actually told us they didn't work with Latin Americans. So,
oh my god,
yeah, it was it was actually impossible to get to some platforms because we were Latin Americans, and I do have a very German name.
It was a big no.
The thing is, I got very, very far into conversations, I think, because I have a very German name, No. So they must have thought that I was not like from around here. Like they were like, "Oh, really nice. So, oh, that's nice. Your work is really nice. So let us know where's your company based at?" And I was like, "Here." It was, "Oh, that's Latin America." No, we don't work with Latin American. So, And so right now everyone's working with Latin Americans. We are like the new hot stuff, and that's really nice. But we have still like a lot of ground to cover. And like people like Felipe is actually like one of the first like professional game developers from Chile. Like his generation must be like 20 people at most, like the people that has as much experience as he has. So usually we are very young in game development. So talking with you and with Felipe and learning this stuff and seeing how you made stuff in a time where, well, I didn't even exist, it's really, really, really eye-opening for me. And as I was telling you, you are really really ahead of your time with the IP and everything. And hopefully you can actually make good on the game. Because have you seen like the new like remakes they have been making? Like the last one was the Rockstar, like this. What's the name of the games?
Grand Theft Auto?
GTA. Yeah, GTA. The GTA Definitive Edition was a mess. Like this is like the a god awfully mess, and people is saying it's really sad when the creators just leave their games and give it away like to anyone to port. And these guys just made like some scripts to do like some AI soft soft the models were softened with AI, and the texture were upscaled with AI. So there are some typos. There were some nuts that were like donuts because because the AI just did what it wanted. And there was like this really young character, and he was called like the old. I think it was Old Joe, and it was like really young character, and it was like hell. So I think it's really good that you are taking care of the IP and involved, and it's actually refreshing. And hopefully, you can actually use it to your advantage, like as a marketing device, because it's really, really something that you don't see. Like many companies, even Nintendo, is being like called out because the port of the N64 games they launched with the new service are considered like inferior to the original ones. So there's a lot of problem with retro gaming in general. So hopefully we can. Well, we will help you sell the games here in Chile. We will talk about it when you launch, and hopefully we can help you like get more Chileans to know Montezuma, like younger Chileans. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Well, we'll be in touch with you, as we progress with the Kickstarter.
Yeah, we would be happy to once you have the Kickstarter to announce it. You can come back, or we can have Felipe here to talk about it. And Chileans, many Chileans have said like, "Oh, that was the first Atari game I played," or "That was my favorite Atari game." So it's really fun to have you here.
Well, it's a pleasure. Shout out to all my fans in Chile. Love you guys.
Yeah, actually, when Felipe told me that you could come, maybe you could come to do an interview, I was like, no, I think this one will not work out. So. But it's really
no.
fun.
I realized that when we were making the appointments, I see you really wanted to accommodate me and my schedule, but I wanted to accommodate your schedule. There were so many misunderstandings that we're doing here at this time. I'm glad we're all together.
Yeah. We would.
I hope I have a good audience here.
Yeah, well, we have like a small audience, but we will do a rerun of this interview. So hopefully
they'll have this Spanish.
Yeah, the Spanish subtitles are very important so that we can have like a bigger audience. And we will. This is a very good. Well, it has been a really, really good program, because usually we have like some sound problems. Usually, all the stuff you have like on live programs, and this one has gone like very good in the technical aspect and the conversations. Well, Franco is really fun to talk, but you too, just know too much, and it's really fun to talk like obscure technological stuff and business and everything. It has been like one of my favorite programs right now, because we have talked about everything I like.
I had a good time too.
So let's start closing up. So I wanted to ask something because before we go, and that's I want to ask Franco and Felipe, how did you get into programming? So let's start with Felipe. How did you get into programming?
Well, like I said, when I first received my NES, I was a teenager. I don't remember exactly, maybe 12. I don't know. I wanted to make games. Also, I used to go to the arcades a lot. So and spend time imagining making those games. So I studied computer science just to make games, but the market in Chile wasn't there yet, and there was just not an option. But so at that time I had lucky that the very first company that was making game was Wanaco Games, and I had the chance to enter there. So they gave me an opportunity. I was doing my own game at home in C++, so I showed it to them. Yeah, that I have this, and that's maybe my advice to anybody who wants to enter to this well.
Industry.
Industry, yes, is that trying to make something. So the best thing is to maybe go to some communities or game jams. So you will get everything you need to maybe to showing off what you can do to other companies and so that's what I did. I got the opportunity, and then I started growing from there, and here I am, and in Germany working at Ubisoft. So and well, I'm really glad working with Robert in this awesome project. So I'm super happy. That's where I started, and here I am.
Franco?
In my case, I started several years later than Rob, but I can relate what he found because the computer came with a book. It was a reference manual. It was not a tutorial or anything. The manual that came with the computer assumed that you knew how to program. And it was translated to Spanish, but it was a very bad translation. So many of the words that the translator used didn't meant anything to me. Neither my parents, neither my family, no one could give me any help to understand the manual. So what I did was I started in 85, 86 probably with the Atari 800 XL at the time. And I started with BASIC, and I was very naive at that time. So I thought that I could do anything in BASIC. So I went to the arcade. I saw some games and tried to do it in BASIC, and it was quite slow until some friends that did some C80 programming told me that I can use assembly and matching language to make it faster. So I also found the same problem that Rob found, that there was no literature for the 6502. There was only some Spanish magazines talking about the C80, so one had to translate some bits from there, some bits from that there, to make something. And I remember that when I saw Outrun from Sega, I thought this is the kind of games that I want to do with my Atari. so so if I know how to program in assembly, I can do games like Outrun with Atari. little did I know that it was nearly impossible.
Outrun was great. I remember that too. And
Yes.
That was one where he had a girlfriend in the car with the long hair.
Yes.
Right? Those little touches, things like that.
Yes.
That makes the game spectacular. And I was impressed by. I remember being impressed by the people in the car at the time.
Yes.
Because other driving games, you didn't see
only the car.
Right, you just saw the car. You didn't see the people. Outrun was a great driving game. But to me, do you remember when hard driving first came out on the Atari with the stunts? I mean, I'm talking about in arcades. That was unbelievable, spectacular 3D graphics. Yes, time it was a phenomenal piece.
Yes, in the case of Outrun, it was again a game changer in many things. The music was great. You have the option to choose the music. The sprite scaling was quite new at that time.
Oh yes, there was terrific scaling, and they did a really nice job of faking, the 3D with good scaling. Yeah.
But what I didn't know at that time, that the machine had two Motorola 8800 no 6800 processor was a lot more powerful than the 6502, and it has a processor just for the Rode, a processor just for the scaling of the sprites, another processor for it has a C80 for the sound, just for the music routines. So it was impossible to do with a machine like the Atari. But that led me to learn about computer architecture, and I always try to do games, and I think that I didn't did anything too advanced until 2014, when I was trying to. I started the port of Prince of Persia. I tried to start it. That didn't went too far because of time and a lot of things. And just a few months ago, another team released a game, but a version of Prince of Persia. But that led me, as you say, that led me to know how to program, how to code, to love it. When you have an assembly routine, and you know that if you change even the order, or you unroll a loop and you have great speed, that teach me a lot about making good code and seeing the coding as a form of art. I remember in the beginnings, in my case, I didn't have the computer for me all the time because we had only one television at home, so I had to wait for specific hours to use my computers, and most of the time I use it to code in a paper. Even wrote the assembly mnemonics and converted to machine code in paper. And when the TV was free to use, I had the time to try the code and see it crash.
Yeah.
And then the next day was another day of paper programming. I think that that type of difficulties made me find current programming
Yeah.
quite easy. And I know that if I keep trying, things will work out. So it was a programming that it was very good school of programming.
Okay, so we are already on time to finish the today's stream. So Robert, please, I let you call out the people if you want to give them any message.
I certainly would like to thank Felipe for doing a phenomenal job coding the Nintendo version, and of course Alejandro, who's doing a terrific job testing and doing graphics, and Rafal, who's doing the art for the box right now and has done the backgrounds, the modern graphics on the reboot. And please come. I do most of my promotion, most of my social medias on Facebook, on the Montezuma Facebook page, which is Montezuma's Revenge Game on Facebook, and that's the best way to keep up to date. Specifically for the Nintendo product, please join the list, the interest list. You can get there through links on the Facebook page. And thanks, Mom and Dad. And I guess I'm sure there'll be a bunch of people that'll come to mind as soon as we get off the phone. But and thanks you guys for having me, Sven and Franco.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming.
And I'm happy to come back. I mean, if you'd like to have me on, if you have a couple questions or just want to have me on for a little bit with someone else, I'm more available than you might think.
Awesome. Yeah, we will.
These types of things.
Once you start the Kickstarter, we will be happy to have you here and promote the Kickstarter and hopefully get it strong and help Chileans get to know about it. We'll teach you some Chilean sayings so that you can do some promotion in Spanish and everything. So thank you, Robert. Thank you, Felipe. Thank you, Franco. And thank you, everyone that came to see the stream. See you on Tuesday. That's our next stream.
Okay. Thanks, guys.